remove crude oil without replacement. A suicide? We have today with us Ronald Stein, author, columnist, energy and literacy consultant from California, and Gregory Wrightstone, uh, executive director at CO2 Coalition. Thank you for coming, both Greg and Ronald. Good afternoon.
Our pleasure.
Pleased to be here.
Thank you. Greg, let me make a provocation for you. I know that you have some skills in this area, but I would like to say that uh, one barrel produces 47% of gasoline and 23% of diesel. These are rough numbers, not detailed numbers. Both products are replaceable, quote, replaceable in the long term. Different of 15% of naphtha for petrochemicals. That is the number, the percent a barrel of oil produce naphtha, 15% to petrochemicals. That make products, 6,000 products. So how do you see this equation in terms of replaceable things in the barrel of oil?
Well, they can't be replaced. That's the fact of the matter. But it's clear to understand that it's not just oil that's providing these feedstocks. It's also natural gas, rich, wet natural gas that's produced. And there's a lot of the feedstock that go into ethylene that provide the plastics and the other things. And so both rich natural gas, rich wet natural gas, and oil provide things that can't be constructed. I'm stealing Ron's thunder because this is really what he talks about every single day. Ron talks about if we go to net zero, wind and solar can't provide all. And I'm going to hand it off to Ron because he's the expert. Ron, but there you go. I'm going to hand it off to you because this is right up your alley.
Yeah, the thing with oil is we have no replacement yet. And with no replacement, you have to remember that electricity came after oil. The light bulb was made with oil. And we got 6 ways to generate electricity. You got coal, natural gas, wind, solar, hydro, nuclear. All 6 ways of generating electricity came after oil because all the components, the computers, the wiring, the insulation, the air conditioning, all that stuff is made with the derivatives from oil. So if you get rid of oil, you get rid of electricity. And you have to understand that the thing about oil is useless. It's black tar. No one uses oil, but when it goes through a refinery and gets, heated and cracked and beaten and all the things they do in the refinery, we get oil derivatives, and humanity has been pretty ingenious to come up with 6,000 products that makes our daily lives now that didn't exist before then. So if you want to get rid of oil, you don't want to overregulate them. Just stop using the products. It'll go away. Of course, we'd be back to the 1800s.
But when you said, Ronald, not replaceable yet, please explain a little bit better what you mean as yet. And Greg, if you're going to talk about this too.
Well, Greg, as you know, we now have 8 billion people on this planet. And that we went from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years, not because of oil, but because of the products we get from oil. And today we got to sustain those 8 billion people. And we're growing, food around the world and moving it by merchant ships and jets. And that's the challenge is how do we keep 8 billion people alive and well? We've had 200 years to replace it and it hasn't happened. I was interviewed on a New York TV station and they said, "Hey, Ron, we understand you're pro-oil." I said, "Whoa, I'm not pro-oil. I'm pro the products we get from oil." That's made humanity, what it is today.
And one of the things too they talk about is that we're relying on oil and we only have it's finite. There's a finite limit to how much oil there is. And that's kind of true, but it's not really over. if you look at the economics of this, we have generations, probably hundreds of years of both natural gas and oil left that's yet to be developed. And I'll give you two examples. One is in the eastern United States, we have two mega giant gas fields and one super giant gas field. And I was a co-author of the original paper on the Marcellus Shale, the largest gas field in the world. And the point, I'm going to get to the point here of this, is it was just recently, 2005, 2006, 2007, started being developed. And during our research, we looked at the top 10 conventional natural gas fields in the world. And those top 10 gas fields, this will put the hair on the back of your neck will stand up when you hear this. The top 10 conventional gas fields in the world did not equal what was the in-place reserves of the Marcellus Shale. That's how big it is. And there's another reservoir underneath it that's barely been tapped that might be bigger. And so what we have are these vast, vast untapped resources. There's another, what I call I coined the term mega giant when I was writing this paper. A giant's 3 TCF, a trillion cubic feet. Super giants, 30 TCF. And I said, well, anything bigger than 300 is a mega giant field. And there are 4 of them in the world and 3 of them in the United States. So the United States is just, we're almost like Goldilocks. Everything's just right here for the development of oil and gas. And we're also looking at that time too, I worked with a startup company looking at Middle Eastern oil fields. At that time, the oil companies wouldn't look at anything less than 150 million barrels because of the economics. Well, as oil gets scarcer, and it will, there's a point it'll become more expensive. As it gets more expensive, then all of a sudden these smaller fields that they never looked at before, all of a sudden become economic to develop. And there are a whole lot more medium and small fields than there are giant fields. They're a lot easier to discover. You can almost stumble across them. So we've got probably multiple generations of both oil and natural gas to be yet discovered and developed around the world.
It's interesting because Brazil is not strong in natural gas. Only 140 million cubic meters per day is a very small quantity that we produce here in the country. But if we could have 300 million cubic meters per day, we would use this gas. Gas is fantastic. So that's my point, Greg. You see that natural gas is more important than some products of oil, I mean gasoline and diesel. Natural gas is so vital in terms, for instance, in Brazil, hydro is supported by gas. When you have problems with intermittence in hydro generation, we enter with a thermoelectric generation by natural gas. It's so important gas. How do you see natural gas comparing to some products of oil like gasoline and diesel?
Well, let me say something that's going to lead right into Greg's expertise.
Sure.
Is, the scam of the century is ridding the world of crude oil without a replacement. And the thing is, big oil is being blamed on emissions, but big oil only exists because of humanity's addiction to the products and fuels made from fossil fuels. And like I say, the emissions is being blamed on oil, and I'll let Craig take care of the emissions subject.
Yeah, and what's really important, they're blaming everything that they keep it in the ground. You can't produce more oil, no more coal production. It's all being blamed on carbon dioxide. They call it the demon molecule. We call it the miracle molecule. We see in my newest book, A Very Convenient Warming, we've moved beyond. My first book was Inconvenient Facts. In that, I documented that there is no climate crisis, and there isn't. It's easily disproved. But now we've moved beyond that in this new book and the CO2 Coalition to not just say there is no climate crisis, which is true, but rather we find that by almost every metric we look at, Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from the combination of modest warming and more CO2. And the greatest example of that is in our agricultural productivity. We are breaking records. I look at in this new book, I look at the top 8 crops in the world, and we look all globally. What's going on? And in that, I take those. If you look, those 8 crops, the most in terms of tons per acre that's being produced, they're breaking records year after year after year in productivity per acre, and it's a result of modest warming, which means we have longer growing seasons, more CO2, CO2 driven fertilization effect, more CO2. Plants love CO2, and the more the better. And also the judicious use of nitrogen fertilizer. But they're demeaning this, and they're trying to shut down this because of this completely false aversion to carbon dioxide that they say is driving uh, unusual and unprecedented warming, and that's just not the fact. We see that if you look on the scale of hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of years, there hasn't been this relationship between more CO2 and warmer temperatures. It's just false. Um, and we are increasing CO2 in the atmosphere. That's true. And it is because we're burning fossil fuels. We admit that. That's fine. But if you look on the back of my SUV, I've got a bumper sticker that says, I love CO2. And we're proud of that. Our unofficial motto here at the CO2 Coalition is we love CO2 and so should you. And I think it's a great motto. So we tout the very many benefits of carbon dioxide.
So your point, Ronald and Greg, that's not necessary to change to another system different from oil. We can stay with oil. That's your point.
Well, yes, to negate everything that Greg said, if you get rid of oil, then you're going to hamper the growing season and the ability to feed and prosper the 8 billion people on this earth, and we'd be going backwards. I mean, if you get rid of, like our politicians and leaders want to do, stop using oil and natural gas because it's a fossil fuel. Yeah, we're going back to the 1800s, and we would lose a couple billion people. Starvation, malnutrition, weather-related fatalities, it'd be terrible.
And it's not just oil. Let's talk about coal.
Cool.
Coal is what's driving our carbon dioxide emissions and increases in the atmosphere. It just is. It's mainly driven by China, second by India. Both of those, President Xi in China, Prime Minister Modi in India, both of those people understand that if you want a vibrant, growing economy, what do you need? You need energy, electricity that's abundant, affordable, and reliable. You can only get that from oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear. You cannot get abundant, reliable, affordable energy from solar or wind, no matter what you're being told. And India and China are going gangbusters, mining more coal, burning more coal. They want to electrify and provide electricity for their population to lift these people up out of generational poverty that these people are living in. And he wants to provide, if you provide electricity to a small village, instead of burning dung and dried dung and wood in your home to cook over and inhaling the fumes, uh, and provide that electricity, you can save millions of lives from that. And we should encourage the use of appropriate clean coal technology to provide electricity for these people. And that's what China, India, and Africa in particular really needs this electricity. And it's not going to come from solar. In fact, we just had an article we wrote last week from Vijay Jayaraj that talked about one of the biggest solar, I don't call them farms, I call them plantations in India. They, with great fanfare, they rolled it out, and within a few years, it had been abandoned. It needed repairs. They didn't repair it, and now it's completely shut down. They're one of their largest fields, and it's used for cattle. get out of the sun under these solar panels. So they've put it to bed and put it to farm, put it out to the farm.
Armando, another thing with these poor countries, it's only the wealthy countries that want to go quote quote green. But with 80% of the world living on less than $10 a day, a lot of those people are, as Greg says, they're in China, India, and Africa, and they're the ones that we've got to bring out of. They haven't joined the Industrial Revolution yet, and I think we could, support them, which would be better for humanity than try and drive the wealthy countries into the poor homeless category.
Greg and Ronald, about politicians and people that defend the end of CO2. Is it how about the conversations with these people? Is it easy to exchange information and put clear things or not?
No, there's. Let me just take this for a minute, Ron. There,
Go for it.
it's the people promoting this don't want to have that conversation with us, and they need to silence us. They need to silence me. They need to silence Ron. They need to silence our colleagues at the CO2 Coalition. Why? Because we tell a very compelling fact and science-based story in a narrative of that there is no climate crisis and the benefits of CO2. We need to be silenced. If we are not silenced, it's game over for the climate crisis crowd. Because again, I'm a huge optimist. I talk to people all the time, all over. And these aren't just compadres. These are people from all walks of life. And I find that people are thirsty for this information that they've never heard. I just one quick story. I was in London last November for the art conference, and we went up to Cambridge to visit one of our members up at Cambridge. And I rode up, and there was a fella. He was a gentleman from Ghana, and he was being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award for Sustainable Development in Ghana. And I had my new book, and we shared it, and he started getting angry. I showed him charts and information for my book, and he said, "Why have I never been told this? Why has this been hidden from me?" He was angry. This is a guy that's lived sustainable all his life and promoted it, and he was shocked that there was this information he'd never heard, and that's what we say. We need to get the information out, and it's a challenge for Ron and me.
So
Yeah, Greg is right. The op-ed articles I write weekly and for American Out Loud News, the last sentence is encouraging people to stimulate conversation with teachers and students and family friends at the dinner table. It's got to be talked about. But the policymakers, as Greg said, will not participate in conversations. And I'd like to talk to Joe and to Governor Newsom. I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of oil, but do you really want to close all the hospitals and close all the airports and stop all the farming? And it's like I say, they will not participate in conversations.
Yeah, there are two statements in your article you both written last week, I suppose, about CO2 levels. You mentioned that 420 ppm is reasonable, and you both mentioned that we are living in one of the coldest periods in all Earth's history. Is it correct?
Well, let's talk about CO2 to begin with. And Ron, I'll take this one because
Here's-
if we look at it, as a geologist, I look through long periods of time, millions of years, and we find that throughout Earth's history, carbon dioxide levels have averaged 2,600 parts per million, 6.5 times what they are today. We're living right now with 420 parts per million at one of the near historically low levels of CO2. We're living in a CO2 famine. We don't have too much CO2. We don't have enough. And the plants that we rely on for our sustenance, the crops, they would love to have more CO2, but they don't have a vote in the matter. So I volunteered to be a spokesman for the plant life on Earth, and the plant life, if they had a voice, would say, "Please give us more CO2." But they don't have little hands, so I have to be their spokesman. And more CO2 is very good for vegetation. Again, we're living at near historically low levels of CO2. And what we're doing is liberating the CO2 that had been locked up in coal and oil and gas, and it's sequestered out of the atmosphere and locked up. And we're liberating that now. This was all natural. The carbon that we're liberating used to be in the atmosphere, and we're just now modestly getting back to more normal carbon dioxide levels.
Ronald, it's interesting because 1/3 of the natural gas produced in Brazil, offshore production, pre-salt, we call, this 1/3 is reinjected in the reservoirs with CO2 because we need to protect CO2 from the atmosphere. Why?
I'll let Greg take that one.
Yeah, that's a good question. Why? I mean, you tell me what's wrong with CO2. The warming that we've seen, it's warmed 1.2 degrees Celsius since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and which is the warming trend that we're in started more than 300 years ago. And throughout Earth's history, we've seen that warmer periods, warmer than today, were always hugely beneficial, and they provided periods where great empires and civilizations rose up. They were called climate optima, these other warm periods, and it was for good reason. People prospered. And it was the cold periods that were horrific. So what we're seeing is now let's think about this. We're being told that we have to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade over what it was in 1800. Well, we've already warmed 1.2 degrees. All right. So what they're warning us about is 0.3 of a degree Celsius rise that we cannot get beyond. Well, 0.3 in your home, your studio right now is probably altered more than that just while we're talking. Your thermostat would not be triggered on or off by 0.3 of a degree Celsius. And if we have more of an increase in temperature between 11 a.m. and noon almost every single day than what they're warning us about that three. And if you're that worried about it, move 18 miles. I don't know what the kilometers is, but it's 20 kilometers. Go further. Let's see. You're in the southern hemisphere. Here in North America, I would say move 18 miles further north, and your average temperature would decrease by that 0.3 of a degree Celsius. It's ridiculous when you look at just. They're warning us of 0.3 of a degree Celsius, and it's all game over. We're all going to be dying. That's what they're warning us about. No, if you look at it like that, it's just like, what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah, here in California, it's common for us to get between morning and late afternoon a 30-degree change. Now, if it changed 30.3 degrees,
Right.
does the world come to an end?
Yeah. Let me try. Can you see this picture? Is it possible to see as I live
Yes,
more?
we see it.
Yeah. So what are we saying that oil, that's a green bar in the bottom of the chart, will stay in the same with amount in the next decades, and the other that put energy in the system, like wind, hydro, will stay. We will not be replacing oil in this picture. The green bar will stay the same, almost the same.
Well, Armando, we're a materialistic society. And like I say, these 6,000 products we're getting from oil, if you don't want to use oil, you get rid of the 6,000 products. And you get rid of a couple of billion people at the same time. But we're a materialistic society. And like you say, I would love to, quote, get rid of oil, but you need the CO2, as Greg mentions, to help feed the world. Without CO2, you're not going to be able to grow the food.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Ronnie. I'm not sure why he wants to get rid of oil. I kind of like driving my gasoline powered vehicle, and I don't see anything.
The reason I want to get rid of oil, I say I'm pro products from oil. And right now, there's no substitute. So, But yeah, you need oil for the sort of the CO2 to grow plants.
Yeah, but gasoline and diesel, that's more than 50% of a barrel of oil. this will take, let's see, in consideration that other energy like transforming in electricity and EVs will let's see increase a little bit more than today, and will take part more than gasoline and diesel, or not?
Well, no, you get rid of oil, you get rid of electricity. I mean, that's basic. We have no
Explain that.
compounds.
Explain that, Ron. Let's people go, what is he talking about? Explain that.
All the components to build, and to generate electricity, or the computers, the air conditioning, the insulation, is all made with the oil derivatives from oil. And the EV is 100% oil. The tires, the computers, the upholstery. You can't make the car without oil.
But Ronald, only 15% of a barrel is used to products. The other 85% are for logistics.
Well, you're talking about fuel for the 50,000 merchant ships, the 20,000 commercial jets, the 50,000 military jets, the space program. The space program goes away without the products from oil.
I understand you. Yeah.
So we need the products for our way of life, and we need basically the emissions to help feed the people.
So we have three different thoughts here. One, that CO2 is not a problem, is a solution. The second, that the temperature is not increasing because we are using bad or worse CO2. Is a kind of geological timeline that you see in the Earth, let's see, centuries and millennia. And the other one, that products are made, only oil can make products at this time. So we do not have replacement for this situation of oil. So these three segments of thoughts. Is it correct?
I think so.
Yep.
In particular, our mantra here at the CO2 Coalition really focuses on the benefits of carbon dioxide and just pushes back against the demonization of not just carbon dioxide, but there are other greenhouse gases. We're finishing up an interesting paper right now on anesthesia. The doctors, the people promoting anesthesia, are pushing back against desflurane and nitrous oxide, the two largest anesthesias used, because they're greenhouse gases. And we'll be publishing in the next week or two a new paper just showing just how minuscule any warming effect would be. It's just, I mean, it's below our ability to measure. And it's things like that. They want to get rid of nitrogen fertilizer because it has nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. And that we saw what happened in Sri Lanka when they tried to do that. The entire agricultural economy collapsed. They're trying to get rid of that. I just returned from the Netherlands, and they were bound and determined. They were planning to cull up to 50% of their livestock, take over up to 50% of the farms. And they started that process, and they voted the bums out just about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I was there right after that. The timing was great. And it's really uplifting to see how the Netherlands, France, and Germany are pushing back against this clean eco-Nazism.
Perfect. Ronald and Greg, I have a last question, but it's a provocative question. Who will replace Joe Biden, Gavin Newsom or Ronald Stein?
Not Ronald Stein.
You mean for the Democrat? Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna take a pass on that one. I'm not gonna say.
Yeah. It's a tough question. It's not good for you. Sorry. Only joke.
We don't talk politics.
Yeah. You're right. Only a joke. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, this conversation with Greg and Ronald.
Armando, enjoy that.
Thank you, Armando.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day.